There's something going on. Crowd loving it. It's a ball, fly ball. Home run!
2, 1. All right, guys. Ryan and Ryan back at you. Ryan?
Hi, my name is Ryan.
I'm Ryan.
Nice to meet you.
You already know me.
Oh.
Okay.
Right.
Baseball. There is a buzz, and we live in Toronto. There is a buzz in this city that is palpable by the basic standards of life.
Well, I think mostly it comes from Pickering Nuclear Power Plant myself.
It might be. But listen, basically Toronto looks like they are the team to beat this year, and that says something with the fact that, you know, we've been losing time after time in this great city of ours, not having the roster. But I suggest to you this roster is top to bottom one of the stronger, if not the strongest team in the league.
I would agree. Well, I would agree that it's definitely one of the favorites. I hesitate to say they are, just because I hate to be that guy that can start coming out there and say, "Oh, the best, they're the best," and then they get 4 or 5 injuries right off the hop, or they just don't play well. Because we've both seen teams that go out and make all kinds of payroll adjustments. By that I mean they go and buy a bunch of free agents in several different leagues out there and don't produce. So, great. On paper, they definitely got to be one of the favorites, if not the favorite.
If you're just quickly going over their roster, Dickey, Johnson, Burley, Morrow, and Romero as your starting pitching, that's a solid starting 5. You don't even know who your closer is yet in terms of if it's Jansen or if it's Santos. And then, you know, you're looking at a lineup that includes Aaron Sebia as your catcher. You got Edwin and Carcian as their first baseman. Either Sturris or Bonifacio as your second baseman. You got Reyes as your shortstop, Lowry, Melky Cabrera, Kobe Rasmus, and then Jose Batista, and then Adam Lind as your DH. It's a pretty solid lineup, top to bottom. I would suggest to you.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I mean, obviously, the big problem for me is I think right now the weakest link in the lineup is Adam Lind. If he comes back to
that's a guy who 2 years ago would hit 30 and 100.
Absolutely, and he's shown potential. We were talking about Bargnani. He's shown potential, but he seems to be able not to get to where we need him to be. So that might be a link or a chink in the armor, as far as I'm concerned. But I don't know at this point what they would do without him. I mean, I think you would have to move Encarnacion to the DH spot, but what are you going to do? Anyway, I agree with you. It's a horribly deep lineup as well. The fact that Ghost is supposed to be one of the guys of the future, and he's deep down the depth chart.
Yeah, it's going to tell you something. But like Ryan said, championships are not won on paper. Even though the city is definitely a buzz with this team, it's definitely not going to be a cakewalk. There are some pretty solid teams in the rest of the American League. For one, I like Tampa Bay this year. I think Tampa Bay has a good young team. They always seem to have a good young team. You got to look for Detroit to sort of bounce back and have another great season in the Central. Kansas City has definitely improved in the Central. Even though Boston had a bad year, Boston is always a threat. And you can't forget the Yankees either. Baltimore was a surprise last year. Can they continue it? I guess time will tell. But definitely out of the East, I like Tampa or Toronto out of that East to win sort of the AL East title. Central, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I definitely like Detroit there, even though Kansas City has definitely gotten better. But the White Sox had a pretty solid year last year, so you got to look for them to sort of maintain where they are. But I think Kansas City will definitely be a team to beat. And Cleveland even has gotten better this year. The only team that sort of in my opinion, who haven't is Minnesota. And then the West, I think the West is always a beast. Oakland, Texas, LA are all strong as they were last year. Even LA, who finished third in that division, they're my favorite team, had a better record than Detroit did, and Detroit won their division. So that tells you how strong.
Well, don't forget Houston.
The West is. And I think that's a good point. Even though you're making fun of it, I think it's actually made the West even more difficult when you consider that teams want to get the wild card. Well, now Oakland, Texas, and LA are now playing Houston 10 times a year. So now, if their records were, 90 and 70 last year, let's say they win 9 out of 10 of there, well, they're 99 and 60 something. So to get a wild card this year might be even more difficult with the fact that the West has such a weak team compared to all the strong teams in that division.
Well, exactly, and that's always tough to fathom when you're a team in the East, and really top to bottom, your division is so strong. And then you have a lame duck like the Houston Astros coming in there in the West. But I don't know what else you do to get around that. I mean, that's every team in the league has to become better, and there's going to be some parity, but there's also going to be a lame duck every year, depending on where you are. I think you need to get rid of the interleague play to lessen that, because I think there's more lame duck teams in the National League than there are in the American League. I think the unbalanced schedule is bad. I think we should go back to that. Not to go off on a whole different tangent, but along the lines of scheduling, I think that's the next best thing.
So basically, if you were going to pick 4 teams to make it out of there, well, I guess 5 teams because the 2 wildcard teams now. Who do you like?
I like Toronto.
Yeah, out of the East.
Out of the East, I'm gonna go with the Angels in the West.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with. I don't know. That Central to me is tough. I think like you said. I'm gonna go with Detroit. Detroit are the Central, and then my 2 wildcard teams. I'm gonna go with Texas. Tampa Bay.
I got Toronto. I got Detroit. I got LA. I got Oakland, and I got Tampa Bay.
So we're Oakland and Texas are the only 2 we're off on.
I like Texas. Don't get me wrong. Yeah. I think Texas could have a great year. I just think if you just make it a point of it right now, I'll definitely go with Oakland. I just love Oakland's pitching. I think it might be comparable to Toronto, if not better. And that's with all guys that you won't even know. I mean, that's how good their pitching is. No one knows them, but they're that good.
And we touched on that last year, at the end of the season last year, how good Oakland's no-name pitching was all year long. And they were doing it with people nobody had heard of.
Now, moving forward, the National League, Washington looks as strong as ever. They got a solid starting 5. They got Harper in his second year. Top to bottom, great lineup. Atlanta's vastly improved. You got the Upton brothers in their outfield now, BJ and Justin Upton. Combine that with Jason Hayward, you might have one of the best outfielders lineups in the game. I mean, comparable to the Angels, at least when you consider that the Angels have Burroughs, Trout, and Hamilton in their lineup.
It might be similar to that Barfield Mosby Bell.
But if you were going to consider them, they did win a title. Philly definitely does not look as strong. They have the pitching, but they're all getting a little bit long in the tooth, you might say. The Mets are just atrocious. I mean, they have a good young nucleus coming up thanks to the trade with Toronto. They actually have some big solid prospects, including Darno now as their catching prospect. And Wright's there. I mean, he will be playing, but they're not going to contend with that division. And the Miami Marlins, the team that spent all their money last year to start their new home with a bang, are going to be probably worse than the Astros.
Which, I look at teams like that. Miami, we'll get into this as the season goes, but when does that team leave Miami?
Well, they have a brand new stadium. They're not leaving anytime soon, I'll tell you that.
Tampa Bay should move into that stadium, because Tampa Bay Stadium is horrible.
It is. So anyways, if you're going to ask me, I like Washington and Atlanta in that one, and I see them both making it onto the playoffs. In the Central, Cincinnati is definitely cream of the crop in that division. Now, I do like St. Louis, but I don't like them as much, especially with Loscon.
So you're saying the Big Red Machine is back?
A Big Red Machine is definitely back in that division. They are a good, solid, strong team. St. Louis, I'm sold on, especially with the fact that Carpenter looks like he's gone for the year too. They don't have Lowe's coming back. Milwaukee is a good, solid, young team, but I think they sort of are what they are last year. 83 and 79 is sort of a similar record that they have. Pittsburgh has some great young talent. Hovering around 500, going over that mark might not be a stretch. In the last couple seasons, they have been improving greatly. The Cubs are just the Cubs, and they haven't improved this year. They definitely are still young. They have some talent, but they're not going to make a push at the title at the very least, or even close to the wild card spot. And then finally, I like the West. San Francisco is definitely creating the crop, and then you got the Dodgers, who made a big push this year to get some heavy players, big time money.
So they're overweight.
And then Arizona looks okay. San Diego and Colorado aren't going to do very much at all. So, Ryan, if I'm going to ask you your top 5 teams out of here. Who do you like?
Okay, well, I'm gonna go with the East. I'm gonna go with the Nats because I don't think anybody in that they might be the favorite in the whole National League based on.
To be honest, I think the Braves are probably the closest team to them, and I think the Braves are in their division.
Yeah. Well, I'm gonna pick the Nats to come out of the East. I'm gonna pick the Reds to come out of the Central. I'm gonna pick the Giants to come out of the West. My wild card teams, I'm gonna go with the Dodgers as one.
Yep.
And this one is tough because this is my heartstrings. If I had to pick a national team that I want to follow, it's Philly. However, as you've stated, they are not that great. But I'm going to pick them as a wild card.
This is definitely wild. If you're going to ask me, I'd like Atlanta and Washington to play it out in the East. I could see either one taking that division. So the other one is going to make the playoffs. Cincy is just too good. I like them in the Central. Back with a healthy Joey Votto, I think that team is destined to do something this year. So that's Washington, Atlanta, and Cincinnati is 3 teams, and I think 2 teams out of the West are going to happen. And I like San Francisco to keep winning that division, even though LA made some whopping big contract moves. Although I do like LA to move along and come out of that division as well as wild card guys. With the fact that you have Kershaw and Greinke as a 1-2 combo, that's very hard to beat. So, once again, I got Washington, Atlanta, Cincy, and Dodgers, and the Giants. So, guys...
And I'm sitting with Washington, Cincinnati, Philly, San Fran, LA, Dodgers.
So, guys, that's our sort of preview of what's going on with the MLB. Hopefully, we have some articles before the MLB starts. With who we like, sort of some predictions on maybe what the Blue Jays are going to do. We already have an article up on what the Angels are going to do in terms of predictions. And thanks for tuning in this year for our baseball coverage, and we hope that we have better baseball coverage this upcoming year.
Yeah, hey, we got some good guys playing majors, eh? We're going to do good.
Ryan is now talking to the Canadian from North Bay. Thanks for tuning in, guys, and be well.